Our next speaker founded the Recipe for Success Foundation in 2005, which is responsible for creating grassroots programs in our schools to combat childhood obesity. Recognized internationally, her award-winning efforts include numerous articles and TV appearances, a PBS cooking show for kids, urban gardening, and much more. Please give a warm welcome to Gracie Cavnar.
I have to tell you, it's a little intimidating to be between the science guy and lunch. And to have a little cold on top of it, so bear with me. So I've got a little hot water here. You know, I'm not a television star or a best-selling author, but I am an addict. I'm addicted to real food. I don't know how I got this organic monkey on my back and when it started, because I grew up demanding Tang, you know, the beverage of astronauts. And the next thing you know, I'm at the farmer's market demanding to know just how far does this arugula come? You know, where was it grown? How did that happen? I grew up in the 1950s. When I was a kid, anything worth eating, you could fit between 2 slices of Wonder Bread. My mom grew up in the country, but she tore out for the big city, leaving green acres behind as fast as she could. And to her, sophistication meant canned, frozen, powdered. She fancied herself avant-garde and obviously was enamored with all things convenience. Remember, fast food was the tip of the women's lib spear back then, right along with dryers and washers and freezers and everything else that freed up just a tiny little bit of time in a woman's day and freed her up from spending all day in the kitchen. Even though Mom admitted that the processed food that we ate couldn't hold a candle to what she grew up with as a child, all that fresh produce, we ate canned vegetables and frozen food and rarely saw a fresh green salad that was more than that thin ledge of iceberg lettuce, because we were modern. It was my dad, that Luddite, who lured me into the garden. He insisted on a garden, and he gave me my first nip of sweet, pure food. Fresh picked corn on the cob. I was hooked. I couldn't get enough. I sneaked around Mom. I learned how to cook straight from the garden. Pandora was out of the box, and there was no going back. I wanted more. Julia Child captured my imagination. I read cookbooks like novels. I went to cooking school in Paris. I had a sometime catering business, a full-time enthusiasm for throwing dinner parties. I wasn't totally hooked. After all, I still use ranch style beans, frozen vegetables, Cool Whip. I joked about Velveeta. What is this, petroleum distillate? But I always used it for the queso. I never lectured my friends or refused to eat Aunt Layla's Thanksgiving green beans, even though they were canned and smothered in mushroom soup. What? Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, right? Fresh food to me was a celebration of life, a hobby like macrame, not politics. To me, it was all about the taste. But life changed when I had my son. Food was in the news. Boycotts, chemicals, aspartame was discovered in baby food, and those innocuous jars of beech nut and Gerber's. It came out, it hit the headlines like a firecracker, 90% sugar. I read Sugar Blues. I started paying attention to details besides taste, and I realized that the world of chemistry, no offense, Mr. Science Guy, but the world of chemistry had overtaken the simply canned food of my childhood. The results we could not assume were innocuous. So my protective maternal instincts drove me to abandon commercial baby food. No more heavily processed food ever came through my kitchen again. Cooking from scratch was the way we rolled. Whatever I made for dinner, no matter how spicy or exotic, went into the blender and was fed to the baby. He ate everything. And by 3, he was right there with me in the kitchen, helping. He never realized that other kids put sugar on their cereal, or in fact were probably eating Trix instead of oatmeal. He didn't demand Happy Meal toys because he only watched PBS, right, Sesame Street. He didn't know about them. He was 9 years old before he drank his first Coca-Cola on a sleepover, and he didn't like it. Food rules were easy to maintain because food marketing had not yet gotten so completely out of hand. It was after my kids were grown and gone. It was in the mid-90s when I discovered that junk food had invaded our elementary schools. Things had gotten completely out of control. I knew about the cartoons, the toys, the cross-marketing that motivated the tiniest tots to demand sugary cereal, chicken nuggets, but that was bad enough, right? But now a mom had no control. If little Johnny had money in his pocket, no matter what the rules were at home, he could buy a soda at school. And what a coup for Coke and Pepsi, huh? A cradle-to-grave customer on the cheap. I was livid. And as my husband says, never piss off a redhead. First, I simply focused on protecting young children from junk food advertising when they were away from their parents. I simply wanted mom and dad to have control. So I worked on getting vending machines out of the elementary schools. We were successful in that, by the way. Texas was the first state to to do away with vending machines in elementary schools. But it was during this time when I was researching everything that I uncovered some shocking facts that nobody was talking about 15 years ago, but now you're beginning to hear. Americans are suffering from the explosive effects of a spiraling obesity epidemic. Between 1980 and 2000, obesity rates doubled, and they continue to climb briskly. Today, 2/3 of us are already overweight or at risk for obesity. As a nation, we need to lose 4.6 billion pounds. That's a diet. Researchers predict that 41% of us will be morbidly obese by 2015. That's just 5 years away, not even. Morbidly obese. The crisis has invaded even our children's lives. 20 million American kids today are significantly overweight or already obese. I'm not talking baby fat and cute, pudgy arms. Unless we get control of this, this will be the first generation to not outlive their parents. Now, I want to make sure you heard that. Will die before their parents die. It's not just fat weighing us down. The financial burden is heavy, too. Weight-related health issues cost the country $147 billion in 2008, double the amount a decade ago. Obesity accounts for nearly 10% of all medical spending. The costs, obviously, are expanding as fast as our waistlines are. But here's the sad part, the really sad part. I also learned that obesity is a stealth killer. These 20 million children, the ones that already have a problem today, have a much higher risk of type 2 diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, liver disease, kidney failure, and cancer. These diseases are striking them early, now as young as 6 years old. 6 years old. Catastrophic diseases that strike this early will keep millions of this generation out of the workplace and kill them young. You know, a researcher recently told me that if we just took kidneys and the way kidney failure kicks in after so many years of morbid obesity, that in 10 years from today, the city of Houston will require 4,000 replacement kidneys. That's today. Then there'll be more tomorrow. So this is impacting our healthcare system even if you're living the good life, even if you're doing everything right, we need to be aware of what's happening around us. There are plenty of contributing factors that exacerbate this problem, but the core cause is what we eat and how we eat it. I began to unravel the remarkable changes in our food system during the last 40 years. The industrialization of farming and explosion of the snack food industry, the ensuing sophistication of manipulated food, and the multi-layer processing of every single thing, even the simplest food, and the design of a food delivery system that valued ease of shipping over anything else. You know, farm subsidies, launched 35 years ago to feed a hungry nation, had that unintended consequence of triggering a profusion of cheap corn. Cheap corn syrup ignited an explosion of processed food. You can't eat anything without corn syrup in it, just look. And cheap corn feed created a new paradigm of livestock farming that flooded the market with inexpensive, low-quality meat. These cut-rate ingredients drove a profusion of high-profit products by a few powerful manufacturing companies and fast food chains. Notice how I use the word junk a lot, because it is junk. 10,000 new food products hit the U.S. market every year. 10,000. That's what's in the middle of the grocery store now, all those processed foods. Today's diet is not about fresh fruits and vegetables harvested in season, distributed locally, and prepared from scratch at home. No. Most daily American diets consist of high-calorie food made of sugar, fat, and compelling flavors, but very few nutrients. We are fat and we're starving to death, is what it boils down to. And it's all dressed up as convenience and coolness personified and marketed 24/7. In fact, 1/3 of Americans eat fast food every single day. The more I learned, the more I realized this is a war. It's a complex war. We're not just facing one enemy, from the powerful marketing influences of these junk food makers to a sharp increase in television time and processed food consumption, cultural shifts that devalue home cooking while it must have been full of corn syrup, right? These cultural shifts are crazy. You devalue home cooking while making professional chefs multimedia entertainment, but then a complete demise of the family meal. The enemy is all around us, and we're complicit. Food companies know how to make our mouths water. These new foods, they're not easy to figure out because they look like like the food that we've always eaten, but they are dramatically different, with chemicals controlling everything from what they look like, the appearance, to the taste, to the smell, in recipes that actually create neurochemical addiction. Over time, and this is not just me being like, oh my God, this is science and research that's brought this information to it. Over time, these hyper-palatable foods actually change our brain chemistry, and they make us overeat. So much about the power of the person, right? Now we're learning that these added chemicals are not only driving the obesity epidemic, they're contributing to the rise in autism and a wide array of autoimmune diseases. They leave those markers. You're starting to hear about markers now, genetic markers. The way I look at it, food approved by the FDA will not kill you immediately. It's a sad state of affairs. To sell all this junk, powerful media campaigns extol a new culture of eating. Food marketing is bombarding us at every turn. There is no safe haven. Advertising actually triggers what the psychologists call a click-whir response. Food advertising that promotes fun, happiness, excitement around food actually contributes to increased food intake. The tradition of sitting down to 3 nice family meals a day has melted into all-day grazing. It's now socially acceptable to eat at any time. You've seen it. People eating on the street while they're driving. There seems to be, nobody sits down to eat anymore. We are like lambs to the slaughter. We need to wake up. The people in this room, you and me, we're the very ones who can change this story. We need to hold food companies accountable for making nutrition information easy to find and understand. We need to make sure all neighborhoods have access to fresh foods and grocery stores. We need to support local farmers and the infrastructure they need to stay in business. We need our schools to serve healthier lunches and encourage the farm-to-school programs. We must educate ourselves and ask questions, understand what we're feeding our families, and demand better products. And we must be very careful what we feed our children, while we educate them from the tiniest tots to be savvy, empowered consumers. We need to be better role models. No, do as I say, not as I do. We need to do it. Let me ask you, let's get out of our cars and walk. Why not? Let's get involved at school. Let's get engaged in public policy like the Farm Bill and the School Nutrition Bill. Hey, let's turn off the TV and cook and garden with our kids. You know, Americans spend 15 minutes a day preparing their meals, but 2.5 hours a day with their children, playing with their children and interacting with their children. Why not make meal preparations part of that family time? Let me ask you, what did you have for breakfast today? Where did you eat it? Who did you eat it with? Did it come out of a package? Or did you or somebody you know prepare it from scratch from fresh, whole ingredients? Eating is not an option, but the way we eat is. You will make more than 1,000 eating decisions this year and for every year of your life. I just want you to think about them. The decisions are up to you. One of the things that motivated me in starting Recipe for Success was the experience I had raising my children, knowing that they would eat anything I put in front of them if they were familiar with it. And at Recipe for Success, we introduce children to their food from seed to plate. We build gardens in the schools big enough for every teacher to have their own piece of dirt to work in. We're out there with the kids every month planting and taking care of the garden. Right at the heart of our program are the chefs who help us teach children to take the produce from their garden and prepare it to create meals on their plate. We teach kids about their food from seed to plate. They grow the carrot, they harvest the carrot, they cook the carrot, they sit down as a group with their class and they eat the carrot soup. You know it's working. And if it's working for these poor kids in underserved neighborhoods with no good family systems, it'll work for any kid. From the beginning of time, it was food that drove us from our caves to explore the whole world. Food fueled trade, pushing people to new realms, to new awarenesses. Food even drove the discovery of America. Now food may be the very thing that's killing us. It doesn't have to be that way. Thanks.
Thank you, Gracie. After that terrific talk, I'm afraid I'm not going to enjoy the Twinkies at lunch as much. That's a joke. Can you tell us a word about today's lunch?
Well, in fact, the good news is you don't have to worry about lunch today. We have done the thinking for you. 7 chefs, all who serve on the Recipe for Success Chef's Advisory Board, and they are all dedicated to using locally sourced, fresh produce. They prepared your lunch. So you're going to get, I don't want to forget anybody's name, so I'm going to read them off. Today you'll enjoy the culinary artistry of chefs Randy Evans, Giancarlo Ferrara, Rebecca Mason, Barbara McKnight, Ryan Pera, John Sheely, and Heath Wendell. And these guys all volunteer their time with us, so you know they're good, right? And their food is fabulous. John, Giancarlo, Ryan, and Randy will also be conducting cooking classes or cooking demonstrations during lunch. You're going to pick up a bento box with all of this wonderful food in it, and you'll be able to carry it around to witness some cooking demonstrations. These folks all teach our 4th graders how to cook, so I'm sure that no matter what your level of culinary expertise, they can probably inspire you in the kitchen too.